After being in trade rumors for nearly 3 years, even before he signed that long-term extension with the Atlanta Hawks, a day that we thought would never come has finally arrived. John Collins is getting traded and on his way to the Utah Jazz in exchange for Rudy Gay and a future second-round pick. At least at the time of this recording anyway, that is the deal of the transaction. There has to be more in the trade, as Rudy Gay and a future second doesn't really come close to matching the salary that John Collins is owed, so I'm sure more will be revealed in time, but either way, it's pretty insane how some of these big contract players who aren't all-stars are going for peanuts in trades. Really speaks to the impact of this new CBA and how it will have on high-spending teams with those massive payrolls, or the ones that are going to be needing to extend some of their players on high contracts, which would put them into a salary crunch with the new luxury tax apron. So it's very likely we're going to see more of this as we go through the offseason, but either way, I actually like this trade for the Utah Jazz, which is surprising because I've always felt John Collins is an overpaid, somewhat overrated player, and any team taking on his contract would regret it, but I like it for the Jazz, and I'll explain why in this video. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy this type of content, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video, as I'll be putting out more content like this all off-season long. Now, when John Collins was initially drafted by the Atlanta Hawks in 2017, 19th overall, there wasn't much that was thought about Collins, who wasn't a heavily recruited prospect out of high school, not even a top 100 recruit in his class, had this quiet freshman season in Wake Forest, but then broke out in his sophomore year, becoming one of the top scorers in the conference. So good, in fact, that he was projected to be a first-round pick in the NBA draft, which he declared for and went in the middle of the first round, and actually exceeded expectations for the Hawks, a Hawks team that was rebuilding. It was one of the worst teams in the NBA, which netted them the number 3 pick, which of course they used to select Luka Doncic, but then traded that with the Mavs to get Trae Young instead. But Collins was really one of these bright spots as part of that rebuild where he was selected second team rookie, having finished the year 10.5 points per game on over 7 rebounds per game as well. Top 5 in double doubles for all rookies, was also a decent shot blocker as well, and with his size, athleticism, he really looked like a formidable player in the NBA that the Hawks could use as part of their young core to build around. And then he breaks out in his sophomore year, putting up over 19 points per game and near 10 rebounds. His third season, he gets even better, averaging over 21 points per game and 10 rebounds, while also improving his three-point shooting, shooting over 40% on 3.6 attempts per game. The man was getting better with every passing season, and still at a young age where some thought he was an all-star in the making and was going to be due for a big contract extension, an early contract extension to his rookie scale deal. But for some reason, the Hawks didn't reach an extension to his agreement, which I know a lot of fans were shocked by. They were going to let him hit restricted free agency and see how he does on the final year of his rookie deal, and right around then was when the trade rumors started happening. Did the Hawks want to keep him around long term? Was he worth a big contract extension for as much as he was going to command given his production? Because while yes, Collins was good, there were a lot of flaws to his game, most notably his off-ball defense, his inconsistent play at times, and also the fact that he wasn't the best decision maker. His overall IQ when on the court was a problem. But the Hawks didn't trade him. And when he became a restricted free agent, the Hawks signed him to a massive 5-year, $125 million contract extension with a player option on the final year of his deal. Wasn't a max contract extension, but it was pretty close to it. And from that point on, despite Collins being a solid player, still a versatile big who can score and crash the boards, that's where Collins started to be viewed as this overpaid player in the NBA. And for the Hawks, while I think they didn't want to sign him to that big contract, they knew that his market value was going to dictate that kind of money, and rather than losing him for nothing, they figured, well, we extend him and look to trade him down the line so we can get something solid for him in return for a young, skilled offensive player. But of course, between his contract and the fact that his overall play started going down in the seasons following signing that extension, Collins' trade value kept getting lower and lower. His efficiency started going down. He wasn't shooting the ball as effectively. He was getting outworked and out-hustled and crashing the boards. And while teams knew that the Hawks were wanting to trade John Collins, and every trade deadline came around, you thought it was going to finally happen, it was becoming clear that teams, simply put, did not want to take on his contract, not when it was looking like he was starting to decline. And it got to the point where we are today, and that the Atlanta Hawks knew they were going to have to cut their losses and treat a John Collins trade as salary dump. I will say I'm a little surprised that they were only able to get 1 second-round pick in the deal. Again, deal hasn't been finalized, but that's really the only draft capital that was included in this deal. I didn't expect that they would get a first-round pick, but at least a few second-round picks for John Collins, who's only 25 years old. But again, it just goes to show how high-spending teams are eager to dump long-term, high-value contracts with the new CBA coming up. But the poor contract aside and the overall decline in play and the flaws in John Collins' game, Like, yes, there are concerns to John Collins, and no one is saying he's going to suddenly develop into the star player or a game changer for the Utah Jazz, but the reason I like this move for the Jazz is given everything that that team has going on, both as it relates to their current roster as well as what they have coming to them in the future with all of the draft capital they were able to amass between the trades for Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. John Collins, despite still having 3 years left on his deal, where he's going to be making over $25 million a year, for a team that has as many draft picks as they do, and young up-and-coming players as they do, this is a low-risk situation for them in that they could get the most out of Collins in a role where he's on a rebuilding team that is in need of a versatile forward and center to complement Lauri Markkanen in his breakout into an all-star, as well as that of young Walker Kessler, who was a rookie standout despite going later in the first round, to give the Jazz some depth in the front court while also utilizing Collins in a more offensively minded role with more usage and touches than he was getting in Atlanta with Young and Murray. That could prove to be a very high reward scenario where they get Collins back to his 20 and 10 days while also building for the future with the current roster. Because the Jazz were one of the few teams with cap space this offseason, and given somewhat of an underwhelming free agent market with limited free agent options that would fit their overall timeline, this really was an opportunity for the Jazz to be able to take in a less than desirable contract, but not as big of a risk to them since they aren't looking to contend now and have money to spend for this season as well as future seasons, with the salary cap projecting to increase 10% year on year. Now, the Jazz have a lot of bigs, but it makes you think Kelly Olynyk is likely going to be on the move. But seeing Collins in a role where he's going to be more free, have more of a green light in a team that is building rather than contending, I can get behind this, especially given the potential we have seen from Collins in the past. For the Hawks, though, I mean, I get it. They wanted to get Collins' contract off the books. It's been reported they're expecting to make additional moves this offseason to provide them more cap flexibility for the future. And you would think that's really for keeping DeJounte Murray around, given he's due for an extension going into the final year of his current deal this season. You traded 3 first-round picks for the guy, so you'd want to keep him around, wouldn't you? At least you would assume so. Also possible that they would trade him, but I find that unlikely given the amount that they invested to get him. But for the Hawks, getting off Collins' contract while also not taking in a ton of salary by unloading him, only Rudy Gobert's $6.5 million contract, and then of course a second-round pick, yeah, it's not ideal. If you're the Hawks, you would have hoped to obtain more, even for a contract like John Collins, because it's not like this is a Ben Simmons level deal that is just dead weight for a player that can barely play. He's still a very serviceable player and only 26. But I think it comes down to the fact that there just really wasn't a market for John Collins, and they had to settle for this deal before his trade value went down even further. So we'll see how this works out for both teams. I personally think the Jazz got the better end of the deal because of how little they had to give up, and how, given their books, their current timeline for contention isn't now, they can afford to take on a big contract like that while still trying to get better from where they were last season. For the Hawks, I'm curious to see the trickle-down effect after this trade and how that will inform future transactions for the team for the remainder of the offseason. But I would love to hear what you guys think, though. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.